I'm going to talk to you about how I painted this abstract landscape painting completely out of my imagination using some of my favourite colours and techniques, salt, plastic card and twig. So I really hope you're going to enjoy it and it'll inspire you to create and paint from your imagination an abstract watercolour painting. So shall we get started? So here are the materials I'm using. I've got a Spritzer bottle, plastic card, a twig, a palette knife, a large synthetic brush, and I'm using cold press watercolour paper 10 by 14 inches and some of my favourite colours, and you'll find a full list of these materials and colours with alternative colours in the description below. So to really loosen up, I'm actually going to start off by drawing with my twig. It's just an ordinary twig from the garden and I've sharpened it with a pencil sharpener. And I'm just sketching onto the textured cold pressed watercolour paper. And now I'm using a large damp brush to soften some of those marks there. So I've used some ivory black, some green gold and Daniel Smith's Rose of Ultramarine, which is a gorgeous pinky shade. And now I'm using my plastic card loaded with different colours. That's the black, the pink, and a little bit of the green gold, and I'm just sort of applying this onto the damp paper, really just making marks, having fun. If it ends up looking like something, that's wonderful, but I'm just sort of playing with the watercolour, using the plastic card to sort of swipe onto the damp surface. I quite like using cold pressed paper for this technique. I find sometimes rough watercolour paper, when you're using the plastic card, the paint sort of gets stuck into the textures and it sort of overtakes a little bit. This way it's smooth so it doesn't get too blocked into the pores of the paper almost. As you can see here, I'm using lots of that Rose of Ultramarine, which is such a pretty colour. And now I'm using a sort of spritzer bottle. You can use a spray bottle. And I'm tilting my painting as well and just re-wetting the paint and tilting it. And this way, you know, the paint runs down, of course, and you get sort of really nice effects. You're almost mixing the colours on the paper as well. And it's fun to do, and it creates a really nice atmospheric misty effect almost as well. And I'm tilting it sideways just to see what happens. Look at that, the way the paint is running there. It creates texture even on this hot press paper as well. I love the way the colours blend and it creates sort of a mystery as well. And, you know, anyone can do this technique. What I would say is try not to overwork it. Just see what the watercolour does, you know, almost let it take control and you're just sort of guiding it. And as you can see there, I'm just mopping off any excess water and paint with a paper towel. So I'm going back into my paint again here, and I'm using a little bit of turquoise with my twig, sort of painting wet on dry at the top here, using the plastic card as well, and just sort of swiping on the paint and again spritzing. So instead of sort of mixing the colours in the palette, I'm kind of mixing them on the paper just to see what happens. I've got a little bit of the Rose of Ultramarine there as well. And I'm using the synthetic brush now. It's a large brush here, 3-inch brush, and I'm just sort of manipulating and waking up that sort of paint because it's straight from the tube, and just sort of getting it, encouraging it to run down. So I'm tilting my watercolour paper as well and blending with that brush. And just to say, I've got framing tape around the border. You can use masking tape or washi tape. I find framing tape a little bit kinder to watercolour paper as well as washi tape. So I am now just going to spritz again with my spritzer bottle, keeping away from the painting that I did at the bottom there. I'm quite happy with that. I love that little bit of light at the bottom as well there. But I'm just spritzing. What spritzing does is you are spritzing some of the paint away to lighten it, really, to dilute it. And it creates lovely soft edges. And I'm applying a little bit of darker paint here again with the plastic card. This is just an ordinary old bank card, actually expired bank card. card that I've cut up, ready to use as a watercolour tool. So I'm using some of the black and the Rose of Ultramarine. You can use Alizarin Crimson, it's a good alternative. And as you can see, I'm tilting here to create some really yummy effects there. So I'm tilting towards the top and also tilting downwards to get the paint to run. It almost looks like sort of distant trees or plants, and the reflections in the water as well. So it creates a really nice misty atmospheric effect. This is a palette knife, but you can continue using the plastic card. I'm applying really thick, creamy paint here, and it's the sap green with the black onto the damp surface there. There's something very freeing up using a palette knife. You can use a plastic palette knife as well, and I'm tilting again. I've got a bit of green Apatite genuine in there as well. That creates some amazing textures, but you can stick to something like sap green or hooker's green. And I'm going back into the foreground again, using a little bit of the black with some of the green there, almost buttering it onto the watercolour paper. Now you can do this while it's damp or when it's dry. And I'm just trying to create some darks and details here in the foreground. And now I'm scraping with the palette knife to create some sort of grasses. So it's lifting off the paint and also drawing with the paint, and then softening now with my spritzer bottle and tilting at the same time. Back with the trusty twig again, creating some dots and marks here in the foreground. I've also sprinkled some sea salt in the foreground there as well in the middle. So that will absorb the paint once it starts drying and create some lovely light textured effects as well. So I'm tilting the paper here, trying to get all that paint at the top to run down. It's really creating a lovely misty effect. I love the texture as well of the black and the green Apatite genuine as well. I'm going back in with my plastic card now to sort of scratch in and to create some textures there with the distance there. Maybe could look like sort of tree trunks. And I'm actually spritzing a little bit here. It was a bit dark there, so I'm just spritzing to soften that and to collect any of the excess water with my paper towel. I'm going to finish off now just with some marks in the water here using my twig. I'm using a little bit of the ivory black there, and it just creates that little bit of detail that leads your eye into the painting there to finish off. And here is the finished painting, and I just love the effect the salt has created in the foreground. There's lots of different sizes, and the wetter the salt, the bigger the mark, the smaller the size, the more the paint is actually drying as well. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that it inspires you to paint something similar from your imagination. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below. And if you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll get updates of my latest tutorials. And if you'd like to learn more about watercolour painting, get access to exclusive content and downloadable outline sketches, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? Details about that can be found in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.